This video is brought to you by Audible. Start listening with a 30-day trial and your first audiobook plus 2 Audible originals are free. Just go to audible.com/companyman or text companyman to 500-500. I promise, I'll talk about the Kellogg's company in a minute, but I want to start off by stating a controversial opinion concerning Pop-Tarts. I know, but I'm sticking my neck out here and stating that I prefer the unfrosted ones. Now, before you get upset, let me defend myself. It's not that I hate frosting, it's more complicated. The unfrosted ones have a thicker crust and are just different overall. They actually have more calories than the frosted ones, and a representative has confirmed that they're different in several ways, including overall composition of the food, including weight, breakability, toastability. Here's what I'm getting at. When you're at the store choosing your Pop-Tarts, it seems like the two versions are identical, except for the frosting. And who's possibly going to choose non-frosted in that situation, especially when they have more calories and fewer flavors? For those reasons, I theorize that unfrosted Pop-Tarts have been overlooked. I'd bet many of you have never even tried them, or if you have, you thought that they were the same thing and didn't have an open mind going in. So, I'm proposing a challenge. If you think you may be one of those people that hasn't given them a fair chance, go down to the store and pick up 1 box of each, ideally the same flavor. I recommend strawberry. And when you get home, perform a side-by-side taste test. It should cost about $4 or $5. I have no affiliation with Kellogg's. This isn't a big scam to sell Pop-Tarts. I just want to know. So once you do that, go over to this channel's community tab, vote on your preference, and we can just see the results. That's it. And just in case it wasn't clear, I'm talking about Kellogg's Pop-Tarts, not Toast-'em Pop-Ups or some other off-brand. In fact, I'm of the opinion, frosted or not, that the $1 you spend on upgrading to the real thing is quite possibly the best way you could spend that $1. Alright, enough of that. Let's get to the actual company. I know that whole first thing was about Pop-Tarts, but I think it's safe to say we all identify Kellogg's as a cereal company. You got Corn Flakes, Frosted Flakes, Fruit Loops, Rice Krispies, so many more. They usually take up a good portion of that cereal aisle, but then they also own a bunch of brands that aren't cereals. Some of those would be, well, Pop-Tarts, Morningstar Farms, Nutri-Grain, Pringles, Cheez-Its, Eggo is a big one. That Eggo logo, those G's look an awful lot like the G's in the Kellogg logo. In fact, that Kellogg's logo is based on the signature of Will Keith Kellogg himself, who used to put it on boxes of toasted cornflakes to separate them from the competition, which was a real issue back then, though I guess that's why it's on there now. So for today, I'd like to talk about what this company has been up to, where they came from, and how they've come to sell all these different brands. This is an origin story, unlike anything you've ever heard. It concerns 2 men named Kellogg. They were brothers. One was Will Keith Kellogg, I just mentioned him with the signature, and the other was a doctor named John Harvey Kellogg. That's a lot of names, and I fear it's already getting confusing, so I'll simply call him Will and the doctor. The doctor was quite a character, a bit of an odd fellow. He was a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, got involved with the founders early on, and as a result, he had some strong yet unconventional beliefs. As an adult, he ran this place called the Sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan. It was sort of a wellness spa, I think is how we would describe it today. Here's an ad for it from 1916. You go there on vacation, get all these health treatments, eat healthy food. It was owned by the church and ran based on their principles. Quite honestly, it looks like a wild place, which could really sidetrack the video. So instead, I recommend you look up some of the crazy stuff that was going on. For now, I'll just say, if you somehow find yourself 100 years in the past, I wouldn't necessarily recommend going there. Though the facility and the doctor were both respected and popular at the time. One of these principles was this program Dr. Kellogg called Biologic Living, which didn't allow for most foods. Meats, coffee, alcohol, and most dairy products were not allowed. It was essentially a lot of bland vegetables and grains. That's the diet that he followed, and it was promoted at the facility. Since it was so restrictive and, let's face it, unpleasant, he was experimenting with different ways to alter the foods and make them taste better. I guess the story goes goes that he and his brother were in the basement of the facility working on some granola one night. When they let some of this wheat berry sit for too long and it dried out, it led to them accidentally creating what I guess you would call a wheat flake, which they then sold in connection with the sanitarium. I don't think it was too tasty, plus the strict rules didn't allow it to be eaten with sugar. Meanwhile, Will Kellogg was inspired by it and kept experimenting until he created a corn flake. He saw huge potential for it, so in 1906 he left his brother and the facility to start his own cereal company called Battle Creek Toasted Corn Flake Company, which was a very specific, non-catchy name. So in 1909, he renamed it to Kellogg Toasted Cornflake Company, and in 1922, finally changed it to Kellogg. It was a huge success from the beginning, mostly because it was just a great product. Look, I don't know if cornflakes are actually all that healthy or not, but in the early 1900s, everyone thought that they were, and they were easy. You can now have a healthy breakfast without cooking all morning, which was unheard of. Then, when new competitors emerged that were doing a good job in imitating the product, Will spent a ridiculous amount of money on advertising to promote brand awareness and just make his stand out from all the others. That goes along with him putting his signature on the box. When you think about it, all these cereals, especially back then, weren't all that different from each other, so marketing had a huge impact on what the customer would buy. Obviously, over the years, they came out with countless other cereals. Crumbles was the second cereal that they ever offered, back in 1912, which was actually really popular for a while, but the reason you've likely never heard of it is because they stopped making it back in the 1970s. Following that was Bran Flakes in 1915, then All Bran the following year, Rice Krispies started in 1927, some others here and there, but then a big wave of them came in the 1950s. That's when the baby boom was going on. There were all these little kids everywhere, which was a perfect opportunity to introduce some sugared cereals. I'm talking about Frosted Flakes, Corn Pops, Cocoa Krispies. The following decade brought Apple Jacks and Fruit Loops. I guess more of a circular cereal period for them, plus the mascots. TV was the new big thing, and the perfect medium to have Tony the Tiger telling the kids that his cereal was... The end result was they were now selling so much cereal to children. Oh, and speaking of mascots, that rooster from the Cornflakes box, do you know what his name is? Cornelius. I just thought that was great. By the 1960s, they had over $250 million in annual sales and a 40% share in the cereal market. From the very beginning through the end of the 1960s, this was almost exclusively a cereal company. They did have a line of dog food and some other ventures over the years, but almost all of their sales for the past 60 plus years had been from cereal. In the 1970s, they made a plan to expand into other areas. Nothing too crazy, but after so much time in just the cereal business, this was a big decision. Part of the motivation for it was, well, remember those baby boomer kids back in the 1950s? It was now the 1970s, and they were older and not buying as much sugared cereals. So they expanded by acquiring all these other food companies. They bought a tea company, one that sold soups, a pie company, and a lot of other stuff throughout that decade. Then, in the 1990s, they were refocusing on cereal and getting rid of a lot of that. Then, a few years later, they were back at it. That's when they made the largest acquisition in the company's history, when they bought Keebler for $3.9 billion in cash, plus they assumed over $500,000 in their debt, making the deal worth $4.4 billion. It of course included all the cookies and crackers branded with that Keebler name, in addition to stuff that we wouldn't even associate with them, such as Famous Amos for the cookies and Cheez-It for the crackers. The motivation for it was said to be a means to diversify a little bit away from breakfast cereals, since General Mills was taking some of their market share and the competition was forcing prices to go down. Keebler also had this attractive distribution system in place where the employees would deliver straight to the stores rather than going through a wholesaler. They figured that they could utilize that for some of their products. Well, in April of 2019, they sold it, or at least the cookie end of it. They held on to the crackers. Their CEO says this divestiture is yet another action we have taken to reshape and focus our portfolio, which will lead to reduced complexity, more targeted investment, and better growth. They bought it to diversify, and then 19 years later sold it to refocus. Here's what I make of all this. Kellogg's is a cereal company, but the cereal business isn't as easy as it used to be. In the 1970s, when all those baby boomers grew up and they had trouble selling sugared cereals, they diversified into teas and pies and everything else. But it didn't work out, so they went back to cereal. Then in the early 2000s, General Mills started providing some tough competition, so they diversified into cookies and crackers and some other stuff. Now, more recently, cereal in general isn't doing doing very well. Everyone's eating breakfast on the go and more health conscious. Neither one is very good for Fruit Loops. It's been going on for a while now. Weak cereal sales weigh on Kellogg's business. Kellogg shares slip as cereal sales slow again. Looking at the last 5 years of sales of their US morning food segment, which is mostly cereals, it's gone down every year. The core of their business looks to be on its way out, or at least is dropping fast. To respond to this, their new plan is to refocus and do what they can to save cereal. I mean, they're Kellogg's and cereal needs attention. In addition to these salty snacks, they held on to Cheez-Its, held on to the Keebler crackers, and as of 2012 are the owners of Pringles. It's hard to summarize, but right now, Kellogg's is focused on their cereals and salty snacks. Let me know in the comments, is that a good focus? Because I say it is. It's not that I have a lot of faith in the future of cereal, but I'm not going to say that Kellogg should stop selling cereal. That'd be crazy. That's what we all know them for, that's where they have the most brand power, and it's what they do best. They have over 100 years of history with it, so this plan of refocusing on it, along with maintaining some of these other more promising brands, sounds like a way to go. That's my overview of what's been going on over at Kellogg from the beginning until now. Obviously, there's so much more we can talk about. Just the mascots alone, my goodness, but enough of that. More importantly, don't forget about that Pop-Tart challenge. Test them both and come back and tell me what you thought. I don't expect Unfrosted to win overall, but I do expect it to win some of you over. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Today's sponsor is Audible, and if you like this video, I have the perfect recommendation. It's called Kellogg's, the Battling Brothers of Battle Creek. It goes in depth, way more, about the Kellogg brothers and the early days of the business. It's really interesting stuff. There was an extended legal battle over who could use the Kellogg name, and a lot going on with that sanitarium. If you're interested in this audiobook, or audiobooks in general, I recommend Audible, because Audible members can choose 3 titles every month. That's 1 audiobook and 2 Audible originals, which you can't hear anywhere else. Members get a credit, good for any audiobook. Unused credits roll over to the next month, you can exchange it, no questions asked. And by the way, they have the largest selection of audiobooks on the planet right now. To get started with this, go to audible.com/companyman or simply text companyman to 500 500. Thank you for watching.